Hi, Mariners Church. Doug Fields here, and many of you may recognize Josh Griffin. Josh is also on our youth ministry staff, and we are building a world-class youth ministry staff, and we're thrilled and honored that Josh would be a part of that. And we have invited my youth pastor to be a part of this. We're just going to talk about parenting. His name is Dr. Jim Burns. He's the president of Homeward right here in Southern California. As a matter of fact, he was the very first youth pastor at what is now Mariners Church, but in the 80s was South Coast Community Church, and where I started as an intern. And so I have just talked to some Mariners parents, Josh, as you have as well, and parents are going like, oh man, I need some help. I want to kill my teenagers. And that's actually a literal quote. But Jim is an expert on parenting and marriage, and maybe many of you are familiar with him because of his radio show. But Homeward, Jim, exists to help families, to help marriages, to help leaders. And now we want you to help us with parenting. So, Jim, thank you for being a part of this.
Great to be here. And by the way, you guys are building a world class. Every time I talk to a parent from Mariners, they go, how did we get so lucky to have you guys as well as this other team that you're building? So it's pretty remarkable. To be honest, we're talking about it all around the country in terms of how did Mariners pull this off, but it's a good thing, and it's great to be with you guys, of course.
Well, thanks. Oh no, it's exciting. It's fun, as you can imagine, Jim. It's fun to work for a senior pastor who used to be a youth pastor. So he puts a lot of value in youth ministry, and he's the one that is saying yes to some of our crazy ideas. But hey, Jim, we've got unbelievable parents at Mariners, and I know you've met some over the years, and some of them are donors to Homeward, and so this is not a new crew for you. But Josh and I were thinking, by the way, Josh, thanks not only for dressing up, but for letting us into your garage.
Yeah, I just wanted to give everybody a firsthand tour of my quarantine life right here.
That's right. Well, let's talk about that, because we want to talk to parents of teenagers. And Josh, not only are you on our youth ministry staff, but you are a parent of 4 teenagers.
Yeah, so I feel like I have great questions today for Jim, and I know you've got some too, but I've got 4 teenagers. I got a junior higher and 3 high schoolers, one who's just about to graduate. So I'm in the thick of this pandemic. I need your help, Jim.
Yeah, Jim, what are you saying to parents right now? Because I know you're on the radio and TV shows and doing all that kind of stuff. What are you saying to parents?
Well, I'm not sure I've heard somebody who has 4 teenagers. So Josh, you just need to put your head under the pillow, scream like crazy, and hopefully this will get over, because that's not easy.
Just a prayer. Okay, good.
Well,
good to
one
know.
of the things I am saying to parents is that, it's a season. And, we obviously live in seasons, but hopefully this is going to be a shorter season. So I think we can take advantage of it. I think we can lean into it, have some serious fun with them. I think we also need to make sure that we do have some space. By the way, they want space from you. You want space from them. It's okay. We give permission to take, some space. And I really do think, though, that we can lean in by having some fun. And so with teens, obviously, they don't have the same kind of fun that you have if you have I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at my house right now for, a long time. And, we're having great little fun games with them. But with the teen, sometimes that fun means, cutting up, I don't know, you play a board game, you go out and play some sports with them, whatever it is, depending on, guys, girls, whatever. But really have some serious fun with them. And the more fun you can have, that actually opens up a close spirit. And as you guys well know, and I use this illustration a lot, but for me anyway, with my kids, when they became teens, they were like, we have golden retrievers, and we've had golden retrievers in our life, and they were like dogs. And all of a sudden, when they became teens, they became like cats. No offense to cat lovers, but the truth is they got a little bit more moody, and they wanted time with us, and then they didn't want time with us. As a person who did research on teens, that's been what my PhD is in, I realized that the greatest fear they have is that we would die. At the same time, during this time, we're saying, the kids are saying, I wish my parents would die right now, or whatever. So I really do realize there's a lot of tension, but realize that it's a season for them too. They're not really a child. They're not really an adult yet. And in that time period, they're going to bring attention to this time. Expect it, accept it, and try not to freak out too much on it. And if you have some deposits by having some fun with them, by really literally opening up their spirit, then that's good. I think you also can lean in spiritually as well. I really do think this is a time to lean in spiritually with kids. And again, with teens, it's not like you're going to preach or have big time lecture, but I think it's the time to bring in faith conversations periodically.
So Jim, a couple things. Josh, I want you to be thinking of fun things that you have done. So if you have some illustrations there. Jim, you mentioned a couple things. One, you mentioned you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at your house. You look kind of old to have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. What's the deal there?
Right.
You didn't mention that. Yeah, your grandkids
so once they are finished with teens, they become adults, and then they boomerang back into your house. So actually, our oldest and her husband and the 2 grandkids are living here because they're on their way they were in Texas and they're on the way to getting a house in a couple of months. So they just happened to land during the coronavirus thing. So it's actually been really good, Doug. I mean, I've loved having these kids around. And yet you noticed right before we went on, my wife, Kathy, was in the office, and I think she came to see me, she said, but I think it was just take a break from kind of the chaos that's going on in our house. So yeah, I don't have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Well, I have them in my house, but they are called grandkids, and it is the joy of
That's
living.
right. Well, you had mentioned faith conversations. Can you be a little bit more specific about that? Like, how would you give 2 examples of how to have a faith conversation for maybe parents who don't feel equipped to do that?
Yeah. Well, I don't think any of us feel equipped. And I think the faith conversations are best when they're not lectury and preachy, but when you say, hey, for example, we're talking about the coronavirus here. Where do you think God is in the midst of this? And how can God use this really tough time? Boom, that's it. That's a faith conversation. Even if they give you an answer that you don't like, it's not a time to argue. It's a time to listen. Listening is the language of love. So you just had a faith conversation. Another thing you might want to have is maybe there's one of the other family members or someone in your neighborhood who's struggling. Well, what do you think God would want us to do? Is there something we could do? Should we give them a call? Should we bring by some groceries? How can we serve? Think what's happening at Mariners Irvine, and I'm watching your church do some amazing things for people in need, food, whatnot. So, do you think we as a family should go and serve? Now, all of a sudden, you're the hands and the mouthpiece of God, and you're joining your congregation and doing something cool like that. All over the country, they can be doing this, but at your church, that's exactly what should be happening. That's a faith conversation.
Well, in our youth ministry, Jim, we're talking about what is it going to look like when we are able to meet again. And one of the things that we're talking about doing is serve projects like every single week. They don't have to be big, but we want our teenagers to understand that it's faith conversations are fabulous, but we also want them to sense what it is like to serve other people. And our church does really good at that.
Well, faith conversations happen when you've served too. I can think way back. You were an intern. I was the youth pastor on that campus. And I can remember a guy, his name was Chris, who you'd know. And I remember we went on a kind of a more serving type trip. And he came back and he said to his parents, we're not middle class, we're rich, because he had been with some people who were poor. Well, they had an incredible conversation that actually, really caused him to change the trajectory of where he was going. And so it was the parent conversation, but it was because he'd had a service experience at church. So I think your guys are going in the right direction. I think that's cool. The call to Christ is the call to serve. When they serve, they're going to stay because they're going to get that taste. Think about you're in 12th grade and you're serving in the junior high. Okay. Well, that helped you kind of feel your call to ministry because that's what was going on. So the more kids can serve, and then as parents, instead of us trying to preach at them, we just say, hey, how was that experience? What was that like? And I remember a time when 2 of my kids, I took them on a mission trip with our church, and I went, and oh my gosh, the conferences were so good, but none of them were Bible study. They were conversations taking place, over pizza or whatever it might be, and then back home. From that, my daughter, Rebecca, ended up graduating from college and going and being a missionary for a year. And I think it was because she keeps relating back to this time we went to Mexico and had some great fun, but also some time of need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So faith conversations is not just preaching at kids. It is just saying, hey, where do we see Jesus in the midst of this? What is God's Spirit teaching you? Pointing out the neediness of other people. Yeah. Josh, let's flip it to fun. And what were some examples that you were thinking of with your own family? Because you're a great dad and your kids your kids have a lot of fun. Your son, you guys came by yesterday to my house to pick something up. Of course, we were distant from one another. Josh was actually wearing a face mask, which I thought was very nice of him.
Doug said it was an improvement, which wasn't very nice, but
yeah, his son wasn't wearing it, but I think he just wanted me to see that he's working on a sweet mustache.
Is this all right? Was this like what Josh was wearing?
Yeah, very similar, very similar. Well, we've been having a ton of fun in the Griffin house. I mean, obviously the pandemic is very serious. We have friends in our circles of friends that this has not been a fun time, but for us, it's kind of been crazy how much family time we've gotten. So we've done a couple things. One, I've gotten to introduce my kids to some great movies that they didn't know before. So they're teenagers. So we introduced them last night to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the best one. It was awesome. We did National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, which is hilarious and cheesy and fun. But we also did some game nights. There's a website you can Google. It's free for like a family size. It's called Kahoot. And they have a ton of fun games that you can play. And it's incredible, but we had each kid create their own Kahoot game with questions about our family, about our traditions, about their memories, and it was a riot. And we loved that. That's probably the most fun we've had together. We also bought on the Xbox or your Apple TV or your Mac, you can buy a software called Jackbox software, and there's tons of fun games, and you use your phone, and we've just laughed and played. And we've done traditional game nights too with Connect 4, and we did a poker night, Panda Express and poker. That's all. They had 2 Ps, so I went with it. And so we just had a blast. We've also done a lot of hiking and a lot of walking around the neighborhood, a little bit of serving. Like I love what you guys were just talking about. We're trying to bring a little bit more of that in to be more thoughtful and intentional to serve as a family. But we have had fun, and it's easier. There's better tools out there than ever too.
A lot of parents I've been talking to are like overload on technology. What do I do? And
I literally have 3 of those questions written down. How do I get my teenagers off technology? Help me embrace technology and not be an old fuddy-duddy, but how do I get kids off their phones and talking and in relationships? Like, I know phones aren't the enemy, but video games kind of feel like it right now. So help me with screens.
Well, you know what? Those are the questions of the day. And you actually kind of even answered it because, technology is not all bad, but it's not all good. So first of all, let's realize it's pretty much neutral, but we can't have too much technology going on, even for teens. So as parents, be the parent, set some limits. So it's okay to be on that. If you're going to play some games, you don't have a whole lot of other things to do. So do that. That's fine. However, set limits. And I actually think you don't let them do that all day. It's not good for their brain. Their brains are still growing. The part that really it kind of seeks through is the same part that has sexual stimulation. So I get it. It's an incredible high sometimes for people. But as parents, you got to say, look, here's our rules for this time. Here's our hours. And maybe we even give them a grace, Josh. But at the same time, not too much, because we don't want them to get a habit that really is something that's great fun. You don't want them to get in a habit. So then when they're off this, they're not, connecting. So, this is the way kids connect too. So let them connect with their friends and all that, but it's not the time to go overboard. And I'm not talking about all the games that have sex, violence, and all that. Of course, get that out of your house. You wouldn't let somebody come into your house and do all that kind of stuff. So obviously don't do it with the cell phone or whatever, but know that the cell phone is a computer. It's a supercomputer that's connected to the world. So, but limit the time. They're not going to say to you as a teenager, thank you so much, Mom and Dad. You're awesome. Thank you for limiting my time. You just say, hey, you know what? If I was your age, I'd feel the same way. Nevertheless, this is how we're going to do it. And by the way, Mom and Dad, if you're limiting cell phone use and screen time for them, you limit screen time for you too, because I think screen time is going up for everybody.
Yeah, everyone's getting those weekly reports and they're freaking out when they see you've been on your phone 8 hours today. Like, no, I'm just as guilty as my kid.
Deb, I actually think my wife, Kathy, we've been married 45 years, and I don't think we've had too many fights lately. We bicker, but we don't really fight. And and it was over screen time. And so I just went to her phone. And she doesn't even know how to get screen time. I went to her phone and just went like this and showed it to her. And she goes, oh, well, let me see yours. And mine was better. Okay, I'll show you yours if you show me mine. Mine was a little better. And so I won. But I think I won, but I might have lost the war because of how I handled that one.
Strong tactic right there. That's good.
Yeah, I needed Doug to come and help me on marriage.
Well, let me ask you a couple more if that's okay. Because I mean, these are literally my questions. I hope they're helpful to other people watching, but as long as I've got you, hey, my senior is crushed about missing his graduation. And then my other kids are bummed because they lost their sports seasons. They lost some awards that they might have gotten, the recognition. Like, how do you help kids deal with the loss that they're experiencing?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to recognize. I think the best thing parents can do is give them and just show them the loss. Just say, I understand, it's so tough. I don't have time to say, buck it up, you're going to learn. There's going to be a lot worse things in life. And there will be, frankly. But, I think we just show our grief and our loss and our care and help them understand that empathy, right now, what they need is empathy. The fact is, as parents, this, I know this, that, hey, this is, they're going to get fired from a job. They're going to, lose the scholarship. Their girl's going to dump them or the guy's going to dump them or whatever kind of things. But this is not the time to bring that up to them. It honestly is the time to come alongside them, put your arms around them and show them an amount of empathy. And you know what it is crisis is self-defined. And so it is tough. Next door, we have a young girl who's, they've got a sign out, Dana Hills High School, graduating senior. And, every time I see her, I just go, I am so sorry. And she actually appreciates it. And I kind of had to have a conversation with her dad about saying, quit trying to teach her. And I'm really close to her dad, but I just said, hey, don't be talking about that right now. Right now, be loving on her and put your arm around her. You can, you don't have to social distance with your kids. Show them love. And it's a bummer. It's a big hit. And like you say, it's not just graduation. It's a loss of a season. It's a loss of a dance recital. It's a loss of a special trip. I mean, there's so many things that are dealing with.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Let me throw one more in. I know we're probably over on time, but I have to know.
Last one.
My kids don't like bad news. And so anytime we start talking about what's going on in the world, like, how do we talk to our kids about the severity of this situation when it isn't hitting us personally?
Right.
Like, I just think that's a big deal. Like, they're like ready to dismiss it and whatever. And so how can we do that as parents as well?
I think that's a great question. And I actually think we sometimes talk too much, or we talk over them. We're at dinner and our houses, we're having a conversation about China and how easy it is and what's happening and somebody who got sick and whatnot. I don't think that's the time to do it. I think you have that conversation in the quiet of another room. I do think it's important to introduce it. And I found actually as a Christian that sometimes the best way to say it is, if there are people who are hurting so bad, let's pray for so-and-so. Even in our family, now again, we don't have teenagers in the house, but our family, I have a very good friend who's an ER doctor on the front lines in Atlanta, and he's fighting it every day. And so we have found that every day we pray for him. His name is Mark. And so we pray for Dr. Mark. And in doing that, that's introducing that we're trusting in God and that it is tough, but we're not totally focusing on it. And I think we can be overpowered by this. I tell people, parents, I say, hey, look, get the info in the morning, get the info at night, but don't just be so focused. Doug and I were on a webcast last week where I quoted a study of people who were focused on 9/11 and focused on the Boston Marathon bombing. And they watched it so much that more anxiety, more depression, and for up to 3 years, they were getting PTSD. Well, as parents, we can do this, and we think that we need to throw all that out at our kids. That's too much of a burden. You carry the burden if you need to, but don't place it on them. And if they're teenagers, so they might be really sincere today, and in a half an hour they're like, I'm over this. Let's move on with the thing. And these people are crazy or whatever it might be. Allow them to be teenagers in this crisis too.
That's awesome, Jim. I needed to hear that too, because the rest of my questions, which I know we don't have time for, but they deal with the emotional ups and downs, and even just the phrase going, hey, they're teenagers, is a great reminder for me as a dad with 4 of them in my house. That's why I'm in the garage. So there you go.
Well, I think it's important for parents to understand that, teenagers is a time of pulling away from parents, yet at the same time, we want to be drawn close to them. Parents, they don't have the emotional vocabulary to address some of the things that are really going on in their heart, so you got to cut them some slack. What I heard Jim say was that, we're in seasons. Let everybody grieves differently in a season. When we talked about technology, you talked about boundaries, establish clear boundaries. Where a lot of parents get into trouble is they don't establish the technology boundaries on the front end, so now they're paying for it on the back end. But this is a good time to kind of call a timeout and say, okay, pick a date. As of this is what we're going to do. We're plugging phones in here. They're going away. Parents, you're paying for them. So, you have the power of those. You maybe made a mistake by just giving it to them freely without any type of, conditions or contracts. And now you have to figure out how to make up for that. And I heard Jim talking about empathy, and empathy is just so, so big. It's feeling their pain. You're in pain too, yes, but you got to be the parent. I remember when I was a teenager, I remember Jim saying something like, hey, don't discount puppy love, because puppy love is very real to puppies. Yeah, you might want to discount it, but it's still a very, very real thing. So there's a lot of real emotions going on. And Jim, thank you for your time. We wanted to give parents just like 20, now it's going to be 25 minutes, but it was intended to be 20. Short, sweet. Jim, we're going to get some more specific questions. We'll do this again. Thank you for your influence, not only in my life, but also at our church, because your world at Homeward kind of circles around in Orange County where we live, and a lot of people go to Homeward for resources. And I've been telling parents to get, if they don't get anything from Homeward, to get the Friday culture brief. And so you go to homeward.com and sign up for the culture brief, which every Friday comes out, and it kind of updates you on what is happening in the world of teenagers. So Josh, thanks for being the guinea pig of having 4 teenagers. Jim, thanks for your expertise. We're not going to pay you, but we are going to help you get better internet so we could actually hear all of your answers.
Is that for me or for Josh?
Oh,
no, I think it's from you.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought I had good internet. I thought I had good internet. Hey, by the way,
right.
Your church, it's my church in many ways, launch Homeward. But at the same time, I stalk Eric, and I have such great respect for him.